Hi, my name is Athena Hollins. I'm running for Minnesota State House in District 66B, and that is in St. Paul, in the north end and east side of St. Paul. A fun fact about me is I have a brown belt in karate, so I could probably kick your butt.
Hello, my name is Hᴜsɪrɪyyah Dent Bradley, and in 2020 I ran for the Minnesota State House 63B seat, which covers southeast Minneapolis around Lake Nokomis and Lake Hiawatha, and it covers also Fort Snelling and northeast portion of Richfield. And my fun fact is that I am very interested in the arts and entertainment and theater, and I've been in a commercial before. That is my fun fact. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dr. Kimberly Wilburn. I ran for Hennepin County Commissioner in District 6. A fun fact about me is I play Dungeons & Dragons. My favorite character is an elf ranger.
I'm Devonna Pittman, and I'm running for Hennepin County Commissioner in District 1. District 1 covers Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, Crystal, Robbinsdale, Osseo, and New Hope. One fun fact about me is that I love to garden. Yes, I started gardening during the quarantine. I have tomatoes and squash and cucumbers and kale and collards and everything. I got it all.
Welcome to the Pink Report. We have Devonna, we have Athena, we have Kim, and also Hᴜsɪrɪyyah. So, ladies, let's get started. How's it going? Good? No, well, not just the day. I want to know how's it going with the race. You know, I really want to know about the challenges. But all in all, how are you doing?
Good.
Still good?
Tired.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exhausted.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same, right?
Yeah. Same. Yeah.
So, how about this? We'll just really start to really dig in. Let's dig into this whole political run. You know, I think that you guys, I would assume that you started to run right after George Floyd, right? After hearing about that. What is that the same for
There's
each
a
and every
mixture.
one of you?
Probably a mixture of people.
Yeah.
So there's, several people that have been running all year long, especially for the endorsements. And we'll get an example of both Democratic and Republican parties. But I think especially after George Floyd got murdered or killed, then that galvanized people to really step up, and then also to just file and run after that.
So I announced in December. Actually, Devonna was at the CD3 party where we announced that I was running. So I've been campaigning since December. I sought the DFL endorsement and I did not get that, and so I was in the process of sort of winding down my campaign when George Floyd was murdered, and that's when I decided that not to drop out of the race, but to continue.
Okay.
When I decided I was going to run probably about 3 years ago.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I thought, I'm going to run for this seat, but of course I wasn't as educated about what running and registering for the race really meant, and so I started doing a little research and realized, oh, I just missed it, the year before. I'm a little bit late.
Yeah.
But I was able to use that time to really focus on the kind of campaign that I wanted to run, and then last November I officially announced that I was going to run and had a big launch party and started pulling people together to attend the neighborhood caucus with us. And so it ended up being a very organized campaign because I thought I was behind the 8 ball, but I ended up being in front.
I think that's amazing. Yeah. That kind of preparation, which shows in your numbers for the primary votes.
Yeah. So even when COVID-19 struck, it was such it made us all stand still for a while, especially people who were running for office, because we thought, what are we going to do now? And I'm sure, like me, people, had no idea what that was going to look like. But I think that because we had gotten started so early, we had already knocked on doors, people kind of knew who I was. It made it a little bit easier, but it still has been extremely challenging to run for office in the midst of
During
a global
this time.
pandemic.
What about you, Athena?
Yeah, so sort of similar. I mean, I started running my kickoff party was August of 2019, and I didn't get the DFL endorsement during the endorsement process, and I was packing up my stuff, gonna be done. And then after the George Floyd murder, I decided to get back into the race. And I, part of the reason why I packed up to be done was also campaigning during COVID-19, which is just incredibly difficult. And I think, especially as women of color, you really have to have that personal touch because people don't recognize you as a part of their community a lot of the time. Like, you kind of have to be like, no, really, I'm here. I live here with you.
Yeah.
Like, you should get to know me. And not being able to do that was so daunting. I really didn't want to even try. But after George Floyd was murdered, I decided, our community was owed at least that much and at least the effort to try. And so we got in there and did a lot of phone banking and a lot of text banking.
Yes.
But it was all worth it.
Yeah, it paid off, right?
It did.
Yes.
It did pay off.
Congrats, honey, all of you. I think that's so amazing. So, I really want to touch base on, what does it look like to be Black and in politics? Black women and in politics, What does that look like? I know you got a story, honey.
Several. Well, so a lot of people still default to the ideal candidate is a white male, and across races and across political parties. And so even people who consider themselves progressives don't, it may not be always a conscious thing, but in their mind, white male is the ideal, and then everyone else is lesser. And so we get asked questions as candidates that white men don't get asked, and about our legitimacy and why are you running? How are you qualified? Why, just questions that white men don't get asked.
And aren't you a doctor?
I am.
And
I'm a veterinarian.
Yes. But you got to ask those
I
questions.
did
regarding your
ask those
qualifications.
questions and told that I was not qualified because I hadn't held an office previously.
Yeah. And assumptions made about why you're running, I think. Like, nobody even asked me. They were like, oh, so you're running on police reform. And this is prior to George Floyd. And I was like, actually, I'm really concerned with climate change and climate justice. And it's like, why would you make
Right.
that assumption?
Yes.
Because
Right.
of the color of my skin, you think you know everything about me.
Yes.
Or, yeah, I won't get into that. But yes. It's a struggle.
Yeah, and they're really surprised about our background because a lot of people, they said, "Oh, we didn't know you had a chemistry degree," but that still wasn't the tipping point, to make them support me or vote for me. But another thing, we just had different comments and where people would say, "Oh, have you talked to this family and that family and that family, out of our district in order to get their buy-in on you running?" So almost as if there was a system set up, even outside the political party, that we had to get buy-in from in order to run.
And when you think about a lot of the seats that we're all running for and we're running for, they've always been held by white men. The seat that I'm running for, the incumbent has been in that seat 29 years. And prior to him, there was white men in that seat. So for people to even start to impress upon themselves that the possibility of a black woman holding this seat is very, very present. And people have to really get to that point where they can imagine themselves as being someone who will support anyone who is qualified to sit in that seat. The incumbent is an educated white man. I'm an educated black woman. When people look at us side by side, they have this idea that is kind of stuck and set in their brain that this is what we need in our seat. This is what we will accept. Not what we need, but what we will accept. And we have to get to the point where we will accept anyone who is willing to fight against the norms, anyone who's willing to be a voice for the people, anyone who's willing to actually be on the ground with the people. I don't think you should even lead if you can't be on the ground with the people. And that's what we need to be looking for in leaders in our community, and voters need to be well aware of that.
Yeah.
And they need to accept that.
Right, and I was going to say, accepting it is like part of the problem. So I had so many critiques from a lot of people when I started running, and they were like, well, you don't sound like a politician. And I was like, what does that mean? I'm a lawyer. Like, I am accomplished. I'm a mother. Like, how do I not sound like a politician? Or I actually had somebody tell me, like, you can't wear hoop earrings when you're a politician. I was like, okay, so I make a point. I can wear whatever I want because the fact is, I am there with my people. I am helping them. I am educated, and I am intelligent, and I am willing to fight for them. And it doesn't matter what you sound like, what kind of hairstyle you have, what your earrings look like. Like, it is just really irritating. And the fact that we had
I'm vibrating over here with the hair.
Did you get a lot of flack for your hair, or?
I mean, so, you know, there's unwritten rules for being a black person in society. There's unwritten rules for being a candidate. And then there's unwritten rules for being a black woman candidate. And you don't always know what those are until you break them, and then somebody will be like, well, you know, you wore that on camera, and and so my hair was a thing, which, you know, I just finally, I was like, you know what? This is my hair.
It's beautiful.
There's nothing wrong with my hair.
Yeah,
I am not trying to look like a white woman.
Exactly.
And if somebody's going to not vote for me because of my hair, they were not going to vote for me anyway.
That's right.
There it is.
Oh, honey, there's too much black girl magic in one space. Like, there is. You know what? But I don't think that the world is really ready for that, you know? But in that word acceptance, they're just going to have to accept that. Just take it. You hear that? Just take it. Take it, because I think that this is what the world needs. You know, what's happening next for Minnesota?
And I think based definitely off of what you just said, you know, after the George Floyd killing, you heard, you know, groups of people, seniors and students and young people that are crying out. They want to see a change. They want to see people in office that look like them. They want to see people in corporations and other places, because they want those opportunities, and they want them now. Like, they don't want to wait for 10 more years. They want some of these laws to change. And so I think there's going to be an ever-increasing groups of people that are going to push, you know, people, policymakers, people in office, to kind of do the right thing and look out for them and make sure that in the future that we can be more multicultural instead of it being monotone and, you know, being ran by and controlled by the same people.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back, though, because I know that there could be, some people watching this video that don't understand. Can we just break that down for them so that they can understand, especially with, voting coming up in November? I want people to be fully equipped with just the right tools so that they know what these things are, and so they can go in there and vote rightfully. So
I think I'll start first, and then I'll just open up the floor for everyone else to kind of jump in.
Sure.
If I want to be just completely succinct and as basic as possible, the way I've always been taught, and some of the things that I've seen even in our daily media updates, is that the Democratic Party is more of a people-centered party. They're focused on what our communities need, in spite of whether you're rich, poor, or in between. They want to make sure that everybody has what they need. On the other hand, the Republican Party has more of a corporate interest. And if you pay attention to some of the things that President Trump has funded early on in his campaign, it's been around rich business people, and major corporations across the world. Yeah. And so, that's my take.
Anyone else want to add to that?
I think that's spot on. I don't think I would change anything. I do believe that there are people who are in the GOP party, like obviously we're a little biased because I think we're all running as Democrats, as DFL. I think there are people in the GOP, the Republicans, who are very well-meaning and maybe are fiscally conservative but socially liberal or something like that. And there's certainly people in the Democratic Party who do not agree with taking care of folks and do not see this as being people-centered and see it a little skewed. So I think, there's a range. But in general, if I had to summarize, I think you did a great job, Devonna.
Yeah, I think,
I think it was a great job.
Super fun. So I have a question. Okay, so if you were able to change or amend the Constitution in any way without any influence, like any outside influence, what would you change?
I would redo the Constitution. I think it's, there's other countries that, redo their constitution or rewrite them every 20 years, like in Europe and other places. And we've had the document for over, 100 years. Now we have 23 amendments and growing. And so instead of us keeping the same clauses, whether it's, Article 1 and Section 9, dealing with slavery and other things, like just rewriting it, cleaning the slate, as long as we have the right writers in the room. So right now we would not go with the Senate, the current Senate that we have. But if we have like-minded people that are ready to take care of everyone in the United States, then we need new provisions and using it as like the old Constitution as a guide, but then taking out the parts that are not working for us right now.
Love it. Love it. You all will agree to that, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard to follow that one. That was great. Change the whole thing.
It's hard to not want to change the whole thing when it's based fundamentally on like us not getting a vote, right? Like not only as Black people but as women, like that we would not be able to have a vote. So it's hard to look at that as a historical document and be like, spot on, let's go. Like no, that's
right, between Blacks and whites, where we barely even have good school systems, and and they're stopping nearly at, especially Black men, they're stopping at high school. They aren't going on to college.
Wow, there's so much. Well, I think, first of all, and this is not something that I would have any control over were I at the county level, but I think the way that we fund our schools is flawed, that where you live shouldn't determine how much money your school system gets. So I would start with that, just changing the way we fund our schools. And so if you have a teacher that has already decided when you walk in the classroom that you're not going to amount to anything, it's really difficult to overcome that. So, and I'm not, implicit bias.
More teachers of color.
More teachers of color would,
you don't have to do the
certainly
implicit
help.
bias training as much.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's so tied to, like, this is not going to answer your question because it's tied to everything, right? Like if you don't have stable housing, you are not going to focus in school. If you don't have parents who have jobs who are able to afford food, it's going to be difficult to do well in school. If you're moving constantly because you're getting evicted, that's going to be hard to do well in school. And so it's so difficult to pin it on one particular thing. But I think fully funding school system is important, and then making sure that there's opportunities outside of our traditional ideas of what success are, I think is really important. I feel like my parents told me, if you go to college, it's going to be great and everything's going to be perfect and you're going to have a great job. And I went to college and then I worked at Starbucks because nobody cared that I had a psychology degree in a BA, and I had to go to law school, and that required taking out a ton of student loans. And so I am always pushing folks to look at the trades, look at other options, because it's important to think of like what will make you money, give you stability, and create opportunities for you. And those are the three things. And it doesn't have to look like a 4-year degree. So let's make sure that we're pushing those to our students and saying, if you're good at working with your hands, then maybe going and getting a degree in philosophy is a terrible idea. Like, let's have you use your hands because that's useful too. And our society needs folks at all levels and doing all sorts of things. And frankly, I learned how much those carpenters make, and they make more than I do. So, like, why did I even go to law school?
you know? And so, like, how does that happen?
I think it happens with our children, it happens in our schools, but the school systems cannot do it by themselves. A lot of our organizations, a lot of our government agencies do not take a strong interest in our children until they need services, until they are adults and they end up, or when they're in juvenile detention. We have to take a greater interest in our children. That starts in elementary school, that starts in preschool, and we have to have a vested interest in our children, and we have to see our children as our future. We usually, as government agencies, do not even feel vested, or we aren't vested until someone commits a crime. And then they go to our jails, they don't have money to bail out, and then when they finally do get out, they're on our probation rolls. And so we have to absolutely make sure that we are connecting the dots with our babies and figuring out what are the things that they need when they're young. Because if we don't do that when they're young, we're going to have a hell of a time doing it when they're grown.
And it's so much more expensive.
It's so much
It's more expensive
Absolutely.
to house them, house folks in prison,
Absolutely.
take care. I mean, like, if we had invested when they were young,
Yes.
Well, and tying into that, criminal justice reform, where we stop taking our black men off the streets, and you know, you hear decried, well, there's no black men in these communities, and well, stop removing them from the community.
And I think a lot of the disparities it's definitely tied to the unconscious bias and other things that's happening in Minnesota, and that's why we're at the top of the list when it comes to disparities. So you can tie it into employment opportunities, and black families, or even black women, black men are not able to get the types of jobs that other people are able to have. You can tie it into federal funding. There's a lot of dollars that are tied into the federal government that they're not rolling out to the states to help with education in other areas, even child care and mental health. And if we can get rid of that gridlock, you know, in Washington, then we could have more money to be able to play with as a state, to be able to fund some of the programs that can help different people and different families.
I love that. I love that. Just listening to this, I'm like really tensed up, because I'm like, oh my God, like, what can I do? Should I, like, maybe I should have ran or something? But no, that's not my forte. But
Yet.
yeah, not yet.
There's still time.
But I think that I think it's so unfortunate. You know, there was an article that was put out, I think it may have been like 2018 or 2019, that Minnesota was one of the worst states for African Americans to live, you know? And it's like, why? You know, there's so many of us, you know? There has to be, over 300,000 to 400,000 African Americans that live here. And it's like what? It almost makes me feel like, what is wrong with us to where you can't accept who we are? We're living in our state. This is the state that now that we call home. Why aren't we welcome here? You know, where are our opportunities?
Yeah.
You know?
It is everything that we have said so far. It is the structural racism. It is leaders who are on their way out the door right now, whether it's in our government institutions or our organizations. A lot of these people are on their way out, and so we have to continue to prepare our the people of color. We have to continue to prepare our black leaders who are coming now, our babies, make sure they understand how important it is to run for office, to join our police forces, because if we're not, people say it all the time, and it's becoming a bit of a cliche, but if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. And I've been saying it for years. The issues that we have with our police departments, we need more black people on our police forces, and that's the only way we're going to be able to change the narrative, and that's in any other career field. We have to make sure that because we are a growing population, people of color, black folks, we are a growing population, and so we have to continue to dilute these systems. That's the only way we're going to be able to change things.
Because we almost would have to have an overall training for the whole state, for everybody in the state to go through, to be able to treat people, like humans, and treat them equally, because there are some people, especially if they have unconscious bias, and they look at Black people and they don't think that they can achieve, that they're about anything, that they can become the manager or the director. And so we need to change those mindsets, and change kind of like how we mentioned with the students, and there's teachers, counselors that don't believe in the children, and so then the children end up, either acting out about that or doing other things. And if we can change the minds of people to be able to look at everyone equally and not discriminate and not be prejudiced and don't have racism.
Everything.
Well,
A utopia.
Everything. Well, and like she mentioned, the structural racism, actually looking at systems and institutions and the way things are structured, and making changes to that. I don't know that we have time to get into the whole police reform thing, but the fact that policing began as slave patrols.
Right.
So, and it's always been founded on protecting property more than people. And so, and there's things that are just built into the way police departments are structured, and some are starting to make changes, but we have to, you have to consciously look at how things are structured and make changes to that structure. And, one of the reasons I decided to run is after many years of watching people say that they cared about criminal justice reform and equity and inclusion, and then get into office and nothing happens. So it's clear that the reason that Minnesota is one of the worst places for people of color to live is that we have not been a priority, even when people say that we are. So that's another reason why it's important for us to run for office, to stand up for ourselves. And I honestly believe, the whole Paul Wellstone, we all do better when we all do better, that we're not just improving lives for people of color, we're improving lives for everyone.
For everyone.
Yes. That was what I was going to say, is that, I think when we think of this, and even when we advocate for this in our communities, a lot of times people are like, well, you're just going to represent the Black people in your community. And I'm like, inaccurate. Like, when I invest more money in schools, that means that is more money that goes to your kids too. Like, everybody is going to do better when we invest and make these changes and advocate on these things. And the quicker we can get to the point where we see that and where we are able to communicate that effectively, I think the better off it's going to be for everyone. And it's also going to make sure that we don't have this, because there is also a divide class-wise. Like, I live in a low-income area that is mostly communities of color, but also has a lot of working-class white people. And I'm like, y'all can do better too. Like, it's going to benefit you too, and your kids too. And so I think that's like, maybe I don't want to change the narrative, because obviously we're disproportionately impacted by it, but I think we also need to make sure that we're including them in that narrative. Like, you've been ignored also.
Yes. I love that. We're getting short just on time, and I wish that we can go much longer. But thank you so much, ladies. I was hoping to kind of peel back the layers of your personalities, too. But I think that the people have seen who you are, what you're able to stand for, and what you're going to bring to the community. So I thank you all so much for just participating in this. And I'm so honored to be just in this circle. And thank you so much for being part of the Pink Report.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us. This is great.
Yes, I appreciate it. So thank you, ladies. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I had such a pleasure with joining all of these ladies. Again, this is Devana, Athena, Kim, and Hᴜsnɪᴄ. We are going to be following them on their journey and wishing them well into impacting change and influencing the world, starting with Minnesota first. We'll start with Devana. We'll let her take over and let her tell you where you can find her.
Hello, I'm Devana Pittman, and I can be reached at my website at peopleforpittman.com. Peopleforpittman.com. Thank you.
Hi, Athena Hollins, and you can find out more about me and my campaign at www.athenahollins.com.
Hello, my name is Hᴜsɪrɪɪᴄ Bradley, and you can find me at www.vote.hᴜsniyah.com. Thank you.
I'm Kimberly Wilburn, and you can find out more about me on my website, KimberlyCaresMN.com.